Hello everyone, this is part 3 of What If Naruto Ran Away from Home, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Kushina Uzumaki tutted with a straight face as she leisurely walked at the foot of Kakashi's hospital bed. Excuses, 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 the copy ninja swallowed at her gradually darkening tone and forced himself to stay upright in her presence. Despite the painkillers he had taken and the successful surgery to fix his arm back, he could not help but feel like a speck of dust in this woman's presence. She shook her head in disappointment, after hearing the detailed report on his failed mission to retrieve Naruto. She lightly waved her right hand by her ear and cocked her head to the side in faux confusion. All I'm hearing are excuses. The room was choked full with the woman's special brand of killer intent. Dark red air, invisible to the naked eye but very much aware to senses of all kinds, ebbed from the woman's calm body, like a deadly mist of chakra that, when inhaled, would burn the victim from the inside out. This air did not thin out too much as it went around the room, creating nightmarish creatures hidden behind the woman's controlled mind, showing images of what she truly wanted to do to Kakashi if not for the fact that anyone outside would hear the man's screams for mercy. Her red hair remained straight and neat, tied up in a ponytail, and she was fully garbed in her ninja gear, but the copy ninja, in spite of all of his accolades, could not hold down the chill running up his spine as her purple gaze turned to him and the turned up in a smile. All you giving me are excuses? She looked genuinely confused as she said this and her eyes closed, as if she was trying to understand something. It was simple really, track my son down with kiss him and bring him back safely, that's all you had to do. Her eyes opened and there might as well have been horns on her head and fire spinning around her feet, for the woman smiled at him with such warmth and motherly joy that the killer intent increased. Why did you come back, Kakashi, after fucking up so badly? My arm. Who cares about your arm? What about my son? She said, stopping at the foot of his bed and narrowing her eyes in a slight glare. Am I the only one that sees my son's genius? Am I the only one? She placed a hand over her heart and sighed, closing her eyes and shaking her head forlornly. Am I the only one that saw this coming? Kakashi's shaken mind tried to process what Kushina had said. She knew Naruto was not just an all-round genius but also a tech genius. Unknown to him, Kushina knew of the boy's hobby of reading about all things electronic, engineering and mechanics, but she just hadn't seen him build anything. Her precious child had powered through 15 editions of an engineering textbooks used by Snow Country professors to teach advanced classes when he was only 6. She didn't teach him sealing so that he wouldn't hide anything from her, but she knew he was still able to hide things from her, and no matter how hard she searched she could never find anything. One simply did not read that much on inventing technology and did apply the knowledge somewhere. The people stationed to guard Naruto couldn't care less about the boy and mechanically did what they were ordered to do by Kushina, though Naruto was still able to slip past them time and time again. The night he had escaped she was returning from a mission in Wind Country. She made sure that Minato removed Naruto's guards from the shinobi force and removed and benefit they should have been enjoying from leaving the ninja force. She was still not content with their mistake, so she lured them outside of the village and slaughtered them all, making it all look like a group suicide. The deaths had been ruled as suicide and Minato suspected his wife of being involved for only a few short minutes before his mind was dragged back to his office. Kushina's hands itched to just wring out the life from Kakashi's body, squeeze his neck until his throat popped, his lungs collapsed and he shit in his pants. She tucked away a stubborn strand of red hair over her ear and said, her now black painted lips frowning lightly, so lightly that it didn't make a single wrinkle on the redhead's porcelain pale, beautiful face. I'm not surprised Kisame is dead. He can't hold a candle to my boy, but I expected more from you, copy ninja Kakashi, she said in a mocking tone. Prodigy my ass. You thought you knew my boy and underestimated him because he's a child, and here you are, out of commission. The man cleared his throat. His pride couldn't take any more of her insults. If you knew this would happen, then why didn't you go after him? He pushed away her killer intent and sat forward, his eye curled up in a smile and his tone tittering. Is it because you know he'll mop the floor with you? He suddenly found her right hand around his neck and his body forced down under the weight of her heavy, suffocating killer intent. Her eyes changed to dark red and vulpine and her already sharp canines protruded down her upper lips about half an inch. Her face was twisted to look like some sort of devilish creature that had crawled out from the pits of Yomi. Her fox whiskers thickened as she forcefully summoned more and more of her unwilling tenant's chakra, and yet Kakashi could not sense even a drop come outside or a dark change in her tone. Watch your tone, Hitaki. I'll say this once and only one, never speak to me like that again. Do you understand? Yes. I understand. She released his neck and her features smoothed out once again. Her face lit up like the moon and she was back to being Konoha's most beautiful woman, sharing that spot with her long-time best friend, Mikoto Uchiha. Good. I can't go and get him myself because he'll be able to sense me from a mile away. This fact bewildered the man, for he could catch a whiff of her chakra and she was standing right there at his side. He's wonderful like that. I trained him myself, remember, are you surprised? He coughed and inched away from her. She placed her hands on her hips and turned around. Soon will come by in a few hours to ask you for any information on your disastrously failed retrieval mission. Give her all she needs about Naruto and where he went. Understood. He stared at her back distastefully and then answered. Understood. She left his hospital room with a plan. Kakashi's retrieval mission wasn't a complete bust. Not only does she now know where her precious boy was heading to and knew a small taste of what he could truly do, but the tracking seal she placed on Minato's former student had picked up plenty of Naruto's chakra before the man retreated with his dismembered arm. She had retrieved her seal from Kakashi, when she grabbed his neck, and now that she had a good lock on his chakra she would use the seal as a beacon to follow him to where he was exactly, or until he found a technique that would mask his presence from even her level 8 seal. Soon would use that seal to track her boy. The problem was that Naruto could truly sense Kushina before she could make her appearance. She had only been able to sneak up on him within the house because they nearly always had visitors at the Hokage's mansion, foreign diplomats and people from the village, so there was chakra in the air that could choke any sensor. Past Hokage's presences dwindled, even after their passing, and Kushina had taught her son how to turn off his senses. This was so that the chakra in the air would overload his brain. Naruto was weakest while in the mansion because of this. Except inside the mansion, the boy constantly had his senses on red alert. Being part Uchiha and part Namikaze gave him hypersenses, which was simply an extreme awareness of Naruto's own presence in the world as well as those in his immediate surroundings, their smell, the sounds and, sometimes, the taste. Tsunade had said that his eternally activated Sharingan eyes were a byproduct Minato's and Mikoto's genes merging, and this was the extent of her understanding for the blonde boy's rapid mental development. The Shinobi IQ test Naruto had taken, his score being higher than 250, doubled up as a Nara heir's rite of passage before they could officially become clan heads. It was just about over Shikaku's score and well over Shikaku's grandfather's score. Kushina couldn't be any prouder. She and her best friend began making plans right then and there, in the Intelligence Evaluation Center of the Ninja Academy, of how to celebrate the boy's amazing results. Mikoto had proposed they throw a private, reserved party in an Uchiha restaurant, her treat. What they later discovered, when she and Mikoto and her were pulled out of the classroom and away from Naruto by the moderator, Inoiki Yamanaka, was that the 7-year-old boy had the mental age of a 17-year-old Junin. He advised them to watch the boy carefully for any strange change of behavior from that point on. There weren't any changes. Naruto still smiled brightly and spoke politely, like how she knew he would. Now, thinking back on it, her son wasn't happy, not if he ran away from her. He wore a mask. She perched her thumb and left pointer finger under her chin in thought, making a few intrigued people watch her pass them on the streets, on the way to the Inuzuka clan compound. Why wasn't Naruto happy? Maybe she didn't show him enough of her love. Her hand clenched into a resolute fist and determined fire ignited in her eyes. When Naru comes back, I'll make sure to show him more and more of my love. 5:02 a.m. Shirubakawa Town. Waterfall Country. Naruto saved his work on his supercomputer's database and pushed up his goggles as he stopped at the humble gate of his target town. The place looked properly funded, and this was because it was the hometown of the current Waterfall daimyo. The man had worked as an apprentice plumber before he caught the eye of the then Waterfall country princess and they started going out, and as usual her parents were less than happy. Long story short, the current daimyo managed to convince the then daimyo that he could protect his daughter. The wedding had been held in Shirubakawa town. The inventor felt the cold air pass him and he nodded to the old, barely awake gatekeeper, the man looked a whisper away from death, so the boy didn't need to creep by but instinctively gave the man a customary nod of greeting. He rubbed his hands together and blew into his cupped hands. I looked at her creator worriedly. Naruto had taken off his gloves because they were constantly overheating too quickly, leaving him with just his large, clunky boots that had dented silver segments rising up from inside the shoes to a bit under his knees. Naruto walked to the side of a building, a tall apartment complex that was painted soft blue and hardly had any lights on, and he dropped his bag. It was too early for the sun to be coming up and too early for anyone to be going about any mundane, daily activity, so the gravelly streets were well illuminated with street lamps and devoid of life or even filth. The boy rummaged through his bag, snapping up his suspenders when he noticed, for the first time since Orochimaru kidnapped him in Konoha, that they weren't in place. He heaved a sigh and pulled out a baggy dark purple hoodie with comfortable black sleeves and the picture of a swaying blue tree on his back. He wore it and allowed himself to heave a relieved sigh at the warmth that poured through his body, contrasting the thick cold that went through the village. He had scored this hoodie from second-hand store close to the brothel during his first winter and he had been using it ever since, even though it was 3 years before he applied to work the bar in the brothel. Next, he brought out the black ski mask he had taken from the dumb criminal he had killed in Konoha, the first set of disappointing kidnappers. He put it on his head and pulled it down so that his ears were warmly tucked under the mask and his hair was stuffed inside, though a bang escaped the mask that Naruto didn't bother to put back which hung above his right eye, but he didn't cover his face with the ski mask, the last thing he wanted was for anyone to think he was harmful. He brought down his sophisticated computer goggles to hang on his neck and lastly put on a pair of black gloves with dark purple palms. He closed his hands into tight fists. He was ready. He checked his gloves inside his duffel bag, in their folded, black cube-like form, and then he zipped his bag up and picked it back up. His katana was jammed through a belt loop to his left, leaving his left hand free, so he riffled through his left pocket and brought out a pair of black, wireless headpieces. He placed them in his ears and muttered. Still there, yes, sir. He nodded and walked away from the side of the building and deeper into the fairly large town. He had designed those headpieces in case he wanted to speak to I and there was a risk of people hearing when he didn't want anyone else to hear. His hoodie hid the blue devices in his ears as he trooped down the street, under the lamps. He had to walk for a few long minutes before he found one of his many target shops. Shinu Shinobi Weapons Store. The sign at the door then turned open as he prepared to knock. A bell tinkled above his head. The attendant, who was distractedly sweeping the front section of the large store, jolted back as he heard the bell. He was a brown-haired boy, probably 16 years of age, wearing a thick, brown work apron over a black sleeveless vest and brown pants. His displeasure at discovering that it was a kid that had interrupted his work showed. You lost or something? No, the boy answered as he looked around the large interior of the store. There were shelves and shelves of weapons and basic supplies of an average ninja. The shelves nearest to the checkout counter had several scrolls and books detailing jutsu, fighting style and literature written by veterans on a variety of subjects. There were more scrolls on a separate part of those shelves clearly named sealing scrolls. Another side of the store had gleaming sets of repair kit and weapons maintenance kit, which were neatly kept in rectangular boxes, of which Naruto picked up one of each and dropped them at the counter with 2 sealing scrolls. I would also like to buy a bingo book, the latest edition, please. The teen didn't seem too convinced. He stomped away from the display screen to the counter and glared at Naruto, who was too busy sifting through the shelves of books and scrolls. What's a kid like you gonna do with repair and maintenance kits? The boy answered, like he had not heard the snide words from the older boy. How much would they be? The attendant barked. Hey, I just asked you a quest. I'm in a hurry, Naruto said, dropping a book he had been looking through back on the shelf and turning to the counter, tapping his finger on it in annoyance. Either you tell me the price or I take my business elsewhere. The older teen ground his teeth and slapped the current edition of the bingo book onto the table, sliding it to Naruto with his other purchases. That would be 1,300 ru, 400 for each of the kits, 200 for the book and 300 for the sealing scrolls. The boy rummaged through the pockets of his black shorts and brought out 2 500 ru notes, sending a waning smile to the irritated teen. Thank you. He couldn't use sealing right there and his duffel bag was already too full, so the boy stacked up the kits and placed the book and scrolls between them. He balanced the boxes in his hands and looked around as he exited the store. His eyes lit up and he entered an alley that was yet to be brightened up by the rising sun. Naruto dropped the kits and opened his duffel bag, replacing his older repair and maintenance kits with the new ones and setting the older ones on fire. He held up the bingo book up to his computer goggles and quickly flipped through them. Got that? I buzzed as the images and words that had finished flipping before its goggles slowed down in its mind. It clearly read each of the 72 entries of the Waterfall Country bingo book and stored them in a new folder. It answered its master 5 seconds later. Yes, sir. Naruto's eyebrows quirked up, impressed. His computers was adapting well to the increased processing speed. He raised the book up this eyes and read through it, murmuring under his breath after each entry. He might not have photographic memory, but he had an astounding memory all the same, and he saw the clear distinction between E-rank missing ninjas and S-rank missing ninjas. The Waterfall Country bingo book was not just a compilation of the country's enemies and missing ninjas but also that of its allies' enemies and missing ninjas. It cut across borders to include Kumo missing ninjas but at the same time Konoha Nuke Nin and Suna wanted men and women. While the D to E rank sections mostly had to do with Ninja Academy dropouts, ninja wannabes and civilian gangbangers. They didn't pose that much of a threat and as such their bounties were not that much higher than 1,000 Ru. The reason they were even named was because of their heinous acts and the fact that they were still not able to be caught, not because of their prowess in fighting. The A to C ranks were the group of ninjas that got some of Naruto's attention. They were the ones with monikers and bloody reputations after the names. They not only betrayed their country but also performed bad deeds during their time as missing ninjas, adding what the country discovered when that ninja was still under their employ. Some were evenly balanced out in their abilities but others worked the best aspect and gave it their signature application, like a C-rank Kenjutsu user from Kumo or a B-rank puppet user from Suna. The boy felt a smile tug onto his lips when he saw the S-rank sections of the bingo book. You could say that killing Kisame, the zero-tailed beast, and tearing off one of Kakashi Hatake, the copy ninja, with only one wind tunnel each gave him some confidence in his inventions. He couldn't allow this to overcome him seeing as he didn't actually match them in hand-to-hand, his sword or his ninjutsu and only with his level 5 wind manipulation that he had removed every limiter, which would explain why his gloves easily heated up. When he was 9, his mother had judged his taijutsu to be low junin and now 4 years after that he was fairly sure that his fighting technique was more refined. Though this didn't mean he could face an S rank with hand-to-hand alone and live to tell the tale. Yes, D and E ranks were too weak for him, that much was obvious, and maybe even B and C ranks too, but he was going to work through 20 ranks before he would think he was ready for an S rank, and that would only be when he was in need of their bounty. He threw the bingo book into the small fire and watched the dark purple fire crackle with his burning red eyes. If he made proper use of a henge and brought in the missing ninjas to any of Waterfall Country's patrol towers, then they wouldn't really dig that deep into his background, seeing as there were dozens of freelance ninjas that weren't allied to any particular nation or village. He needed to space out how many times he brought in a missing ninja into different patrol towers of different hidden villages so as not to gain attention from the villages. The red-eyed boy exited the alley as he stuffed a ceiling scroll into his pants pocket and went further into the town to find a tech store. The Amekige's Tower. Amigakure no Sato. The meeting room was silent. No one dared speak. The god of Am sat on his throne, his thin red hair hanging over the right side of his face and his powerful red eyes shining ominously. He perched his right hand on the armrest of his throne and placed his chin between his thumb and pointer finger, his mouth turned down in a terse frown. A purple-haired beauty stood to his right and her face was devoid of emotion. She had a black piercing on her bottom lip and through her ears, and like every other person in the room she wore a black cloak with red clouds, fully closed up and with a high collar that reached her nose. Her dark brown eyes roved from left to right, reading the mood of each member from the varied expressions. Sasori had an invisible, wooden smile on his lips but his dark brown eyes were lowered in respect. Daidara's face was twisted in anger and his hands' knuckles were white, Kakazu's arms were crossed and, like his partner, Hidden, his head was tilted up and his eyes were unreadable, Hidden's eyes were closed and a bright smile danced on his lips, his chest rumbled with a quiet goggle every once in a while, Itachi was stoic and silent, as unmoving as a rock, Toby sniffed and his head was lowered and Zetsu's black and white face wrinkled with a deep frown. Nagato didn't look so pleased. How could he have known that the Namikaze kid could have been that strong? The boy was an unknown and was considered less than a threat, so Zetsu didn't bother keeping tabs on the red-eyed part Uchiha. Kushina too wasn't that important since the woman's locations were usually, when she wasn't on a mission, known by the Hokage's personal staff, so she too wasn't under surveillance. Who could have known that Naruto would one-shot Kisame and Kakashi at the same? Toby would have stepped in and noticed anything wrong, but it had all happened too quickly. They were still in the fund collection phase of their plan, and the money Kushina intended to pay Kisame for the completion of the mission would have set them off for what they wanted to use it for. The Shark Man had asked Zetsu to help him locate the boy, and the plant creature couldn't find a single trace of Naruto that would directly lead him back to the runaway. It ended up being Orochimaru, a former member of the rogue organization, that led him to the boy when Kakashi and Kisame were noticing a small influx of unknown ninjas into the village. Kisame's death was a great loss to the organization. The S-ranked Kiri missing ninja was the top 5 strongest in the room, in Nagato's opinion, but one thing stood above everything in this situation. Naruto would be a great asset to the Akatsuki. The leader of the Akatsuki hummed and said, "Do we know where he is?" Zetsu was hesitant to answer. No. Nagato wasn't surprised by that answer. Zetsu had gathered as much information on Naruto as possible after Kisame was killed. The boy had successfully stayed under the radar for 4 straight years, meaning that was the only thing Zetsu could find about the boy. Naruto was a remarkable child. He created his own wind-based attack, and that attack didn't make use of a single drop of chakra, not even a sliver, and that made the wind attack a little bit less refined and packed with pent-up, raw wind power. If Toby and Zetsu hadn't seen it for themselves, they wouldn't have believed it. He has to be found and convinced to join the Akatsuki. Nagato rumbled, and his purple Rinnegan flicked to Deidara as the Mad Bomber's head twitched with irritation. Is there a problem, Deidara? Why do we need that little Namika's shit anyway? He spat venomously, glaring downwards and making sure his eyes were not looking directly on the fear-inspiring eyes of his leader. One Konoha ninja is more than enough. Here he shot a hate-filled look at the ever-impassive Itachi. The Akatsuki is down 1 member and there are no other worthy S-ranks around. Naruto is the only logical choice. Deidara interjected with angry, bloodshot eyes. How could some shithead Namika's one-shot Kisame and Kakashi? His voice echoed around the deathly silent meeting room. Sasori didn't bother trying to shut his partner up. He wanted to see how their leader was going to kill Deidara anyway. Kisame is a motherfucking S-rank. That kid is a motherfucking nobody. He made sure not to raise his voice, but his grating rage reverberated through the room. Zetsu cleared his throat and cut the tense silence by saying, "I saw it with my own eyes." Well, you saw wrong. The irate blonde scoffed. Nagato squashed his annoyance and sat forward on his throne, making the others lean away from him and Deidara to clamp his mouth shut. The bomber submissively lowered his head and frowned to himself. Sasori, Deidara, I want you to try and convince the boy to join us. If he disagrees, then capture and bring him back here, Taram. Use lethal force if you have to and retreat if you must. He pointedly stared at the living puppet and the man serenely stared back, unafraid. The silent message was passed between them, and the older, more professional of the pair nodded in understanding at the unsaid words of the leader, dragged Deidara back alive when the situation became too hairy. He had initially wanted to send Toby to recruit the boy, wherever he was. He wanted sense to be beaten into Deidara's head, but, just to make sure, he said to Itachi, "Support them." Okay, was the Uchiha's simple response. If you can't convince him, then hypnotize him. 3 S-ranks were now on his tail, and they were not going to go easy on him if he resisted. The god of Am's plan wouldn't fail. 10:11 a.m. Waterfall Country. The country wasn't called Waterfall Country for nothing. There were a total of 39 waterfalls in the region, the most in any other place on the continent, and the biggest waterfall hid the massive, developed cave called Hidden Waterfall Village. 10 miles northeast of Shirobakawa town were a range of waterfalls, about 7 in number, and all of them were stacked on top of each other. It was considered the most dangerous place in the country because of how strong the water currents flowed from the first waterfall at the top down the very last, which was able to strip flesh from bone. No one was keen on traversing these falls, and so several signs were placed around the place to ward off any person curious enough to go near them. The series of falls were incredibly high, so there was plenty of mist at the bottom, and the water life was specifically adapted to survive the strong water currents. It was a private spot and no one would expect a 13-year-old boy to go near there, which was exactly why Naruto hid inside the single cave behind the top second waterfall. It would have to do for a little while. Naruto gave himself 2 weeks before he moved to another destination. There was a loud boom from outside the cave and a circle of water opened. Naruto quickly flew through it and skidded to a stop after 3 steps. The water behind him kept falling down normally soon after the circle closed after Naruto. His boots slightly smoked with white vapor from hot wind and water and he grunted as he dropped a burlap sack onto the ground heavily. Leaves, twigs, broken branches and a few loose pieces of clothing he had found in the forest around the 7 waterfalls tumbled out from the mouth of the sack and the boy swiped his forehead with the back of his large technical gloves with a sigh. His bright red eyes looked around the cave, only being lit up by small pulsing light coming from his computer goggles, placed on his duffel bag, which was at the far back of the apartment-sized cave. He was still in his warm hoodie, his ski mask was still on his head and his gloves were still on his hands. The boy arranged the leaves on the ground into a large mound and knelt down beside it with a matchbox in his hand. He struck a matchstick and threw it into the stack of leaves and wood, gently blowing into it to get it to catch fire. He rubbed his eyes and coughed when the smoke rose up and almost filled the cave. If not for 3 small fans, Naruto had the foresight to set close to the fire, pushing the smoke out of the cave and into the water, powerfully falling down outside. No one could see the smoke or even the change of color due to the speed and overpowering nature of the water. He didn't want to use a campfire technique because it used chakra and chakra could be detected. The fans whirred gently and the boy got off his knees, slipping off his gloves and boots and neatly placing them about 2 feet away from the fire, palms down and boots upright. Leaning against his duffel bag was a new backpack he bought during his time in town. He lifted the bag up and carried it towards the fire, dropping it and unzipping it. The boy then began to patiently, slowly place all of his purchases for that day on the ground, around the fire, shuffling here and there and scratching his chin with each item he dropped. Turn off that light, Sure, boss. The light from his goggles flicked off and Naruto asked. Check again if I got everything. For the 3rd time, I scrolled through the list of tools and items Naruto needed to make a better, more advanced pair of gloves and boots. A sharp beam of light shot out from the goggles and swept over the things around the warm fire, not taking Naruto into too much regard as it roved back and forth twice. Everything is here, sir. Perfect. His eyes sparkled with bubbling excitement as he saw the great quality tech he bought with his money. Some mobile phones, a solder, extra thin wires, 4 CPUs, an array of tiny screws and screwdrivers, a large stack of metal plates, a plain white half-face mask, a pack of spray paint, 3 packs of large and small light bulbs each, 10 laser pointers, 5 speakers, 5 magnets, thick work gloves, a few leather bags, a bottle of hair dye, a guidebook of Waterfall Country and a detailed map of the country. These were the things he couldn't get in Konoha without going to a reputable store, thus getting cited. He had to stick to low quality and that was why his gloves always malfunctioned when he used them too much. The store clerk was surprised that a henged version of him wanted to buy so much and Naruto ensured to use his haggling skills to drop the total price of 36,500 Ru to 30,000 Ru. His eyebrows lowered in thought and he mumbled. I've got 20,620 Ru left, huh? That is correct, sir. He walked to his goggles and put them on. All right. Show me my gloves. The image of Naruto's latest design for his gloves came before his red eyes. He didn't have the time to set up his projectors to make building his tech easier, but nothing was ever easy for him. The image displayed by I still looked technical and as if it was projected before him, so the genius boy used his hands to expand and swipe from left to right, examining it once more to make sure he didn't miss anything, no mistakes. He wanted as little retries and failures as possible. Let me know when it's 4 in the afternoon, okay? Of course, sir. I still didn't approve of Naruto's work ethic, knowing that its creator wanted to work for 6 hours straight on his gloves, but it was glad that Naruto wasn't as tense as he was in Konoha. His only hurry was to relocate from place to place. Naruto was a bit more relaxed and so I didn't have much to complain about. Do you also want me to keep up my sensory field? Sure. I only want to see schematics for my glove, so you won't use that much power. Naruto answered and trudged to the fire, picking up a mobile phone and popping the battery out from the back. I's sensory field was a sphere of invisible energy coming from Naruto's goggles to detect any living creature within a 5-mile radius. It sensed chakra of all kinds as well as warmth and heartbeats. Keeping this field operational 24/7 took a bit out of Ai's processing speed, especially when it was away from its primary source of power, the sun, so Naruto only turned this field on when his guard was low, meaning when he was sleeping or deep at work in his projects. The base design for his planned gloves blipped with parts he needed and the boy craftily assembled them together, his eyes twitching from one side to the other and his hands a blur of activity. It was hard working on a project with only a fire as a source of light, but his fiery red eyes were gradually growing accustomed to the poor visibility. Use my sword to bring over my repair and maintenance kits, Naruto suddenly said after 2 long hours of pure, single-minded, blazing work. Off by the duffel bag, Naruto's sheathed katana levitated off the ground and its pointed side gently ran through the handles of the 2 kits Naruto was talking about. It tilted itself back and the kit slid down the sheath and the sword floated to Naruto, where Naruto swiped them off the blade, muttering his thanks to his computer companion, and went back to his project. I watched on, completely fascinated at how smoothly its master went about the cave, as if his mind knew, 5 steps ahead, what to do and how to do it. Naruto overplanned so as to reduce the risk of failure, which was why he quadruple-checked his glove and boot schematics before he even had the tools to invent them, but it wasn't only that. There was this air of comfort and peace about Naruto as he sailed around the fire, picking and dropping items and rounding back to where he was building a fresh pair of gloves. He knew what he was doing and I felt deep pride that it was able to witness its master's genius and even more pride to be able to serve its master. I was an artificially intelligent life form made up of complex set of numbers and an even more dizzying set of codes no one but Naruto could ever hope to comprehend, but it was still, with each subsequent evolution, gradually gaining more sentience and understanding of the world. Emotions felt foreign and new to her, though there was always a deep-seated adoration for her master that had been spinning in the computer's mind since it had first awakened. The computer's biggest fear, it realized then and there as it marveled at Naruto's determination, was that Naruto wouldn't have a need for it anymore. Its creator was smarter and wiser and soon it would be replaced by a better AI computer, like how Naruto was replacing his gloves with a much better version. I didn't feel the dread of fear for being turned off. No. It felt a small dip in its emotion at the thought of Naruto discarding it for something else. I was about to resolve itself to be useful to Naruto until he had no more use for it until the red-eyed boy, not sensing the internal turmoil of his digital companion, breathed out and his lips quirked down in concentration, twirling a small screwdriver in his right hand and kneeling over a small, carefully built motherboard, said, Boss. I answered after a pause. Remind me to upgrade you when I wake up from my evening nap. Ai's mood lifted a tiny bit. Yes, sir. Naruto had no intention of replacing Ai with anything else and this reminder proved it. The boy would continue to upgrade his computer until Ai could do the upgrades itself. He took off his gloves. Naruto connected 2 wires to the bottom of the motherboard and soldered them in place, looking at them with squinted, expert eyes. He pursed his lips and blew them to get any dust off and held the 3x3-inch motherboard with his thumbs and pointer fingers at each opposite corner. The ends of the wires were connected to the bottom left side of his goggles. He braced himself and said, Give it some power. 5 red lights on the small board beeped on, 1 light for each left finger. Naruto's eyebrows slowly lifted up his forehead and entered his hairline in anticipation, until bang! 4 of the lights exploded, leaving only the light for his left thumb on the motherboard. Naruto chuckled lightly and coughed away the smoke, waving his right hand over his face and rubbing off the soot on his cheeks. I relished Naruto's minor amusement. That went better than I expected. He dropped the board and cracked his knuckles to make sure his hands weren't damaged. He rolled his neck and pulled up the sleeves of his purple hoodie, hunched his shoulders over the board and muttered, Let's try this again. Author's note. Instead of a next time I have a side story to fill in the gap. Why Naruto didn't simply allow Orochimaru to take him to Sound and why Naruto wouldn't have stayed there anyway. It starts off from where I left off in chapter 3. I really should have put it in the immediate last chapter, looking back on it, but, as dumb as this sounds, I was too lazy to put it down and also I forgot. Side story. Flashback. I could not disobey its master, though it still futilely objected to the second part of its master's plan. Boss, this is a bad idea. Naruto blinked once, mildly interested that I, for the first time, was commenting negatively on one of his ideas. He pinched off the fire, water, lightning and earth holographic projections of his gloves and boots and threw those parts away, where I stashed them into a compressed folder, most likely never to be seen again, asking, "Why do you think so?" "I believe that it would be detrimental to your health if you continually tax your body as you look for these perfect kidnappers," I said with wavering sureness. The computer's metallic voice cleared its non-existent throat, surprisingly, and went on. "Would it not be better if you allowed them to take you to Sound and stayed there as a ninja? You would have the protection of a Sannin and his subordinates, and Hidden Sound is still a village that cannot be precisely pointed out on a map. Your location would be secure." The red-eyed boy sighed and rubbed his eyes. Besides the fact that Orochimaru is abundant with enemies, of which Konoha is the foremost, and the bigger fact that if Konoha ninjas find out that I'm no longer in the village, which won't take long if my mother continues hiring outside trackers, they would find Sound. There is one massive reason I want to stay as far away from that creep as possible. "Why, sir?" Naruto answered Ai's question with a question. Why was Orochimaru expelled from the ninja force and branded as a missing ninja? The sophisticated computer could see the point its master was driving to a mile away, but it could not leave a question Naruto had thrown to it unanswered without doing a thorough check of its memory bank. He was caught. I regretted not checking itself to get its facts straight. Naruto heard the hesitation but waited for the computer to reply as he threw away bits and pieces of wiring in the holographic projection that would make the gloves clunky. Purchasing underage children from a wanted slave trader within Fire Country borders. He has been doing this for years, since his Chunin days. I had gotten this information from the lab Naruto had discovered years ago, the one he stumbled upon when he was finding a secret route out of the village. There weren't that many, but there were cages and hidden rooms that were littered with specifically what looked like children's footprints and scrawled names on the weathered rocky walls of their prisons, written with their nails. The boy could only guess that it was the only way for the prisoners to keep their hopes up. That if they wrote the names, then when people came to save them, then they wouldn't bother asking the names and just read it off the walls. Naruto had also found littered skeletons on the ground, years into decay, and that made the room reek of decomposing human bodies, human waste and deaths. The sigh and the stench were so bad that the inventor had to leave the building to throw up, not returning for a few days, and on coming back he had I quickly scan the interior of the prison as he held his breath and ran out again before he could inhale the foul odor. Most of the skeletons were organized properly, like they were untouched, and he could see slash marks on the necks, stabs through the skull and, in 3 cases, severed spines. So the summary was that Orochimaru couldn't take them with him and he didn't want them with Konoha, so he killed them. The warehouse was a known monument that was strictly forbidden from anyone, even shinobi with Anbu level clearance, and this meant that the authorities at the time of the bust, the Sandaime and most of the council, knew of the inhumane pens children were kept in, killed in, and they didn't respectfully bury their remains. The building was kept up as a reminder of the depths humanity could reach in their selfishness. It was highly guarded, and yet Naruto had found his way in and out on 3 occasions. Naruto rubbed his nose with the back of his right hand and turned to his gloves so he could work, unsatisfied with where I had stopped her report. Keep going. He also took children from villages. This information was gathered from what he had overheard during his 1 year as a street rat. Naruto hummed. And what did he do to the children he took and purchased? The inventor urged. He experimented on them. And the boy interrupted, stopping his work altogether and clenching his hand. He slowly placed his tight fists on the desk and narrowed his eyes at his gloves. I could sense the boy's discomfort. Sir. No. Tell me, what did Orochimaru do to those kids? Naruto ordered in a low, tense voice. The man had been particularly proud of what he did and often wrote detailed reports of his profane acts in a partly decayed journal. The boy couldn't get past the first few paragraphs before he set the book ablaze. But I had gotten an eyeful of what was on that page and 13 more pages as the boy threw the book into the inferno. He repeatedly forced himself on them. The boy wasn't satisfied. I didn't want to say it, but the boy pressed on. He did what? He raped them, sir. Yeah, that's right. Naruto breathed out with a deep frown. He forced his hands open and flexed them, regaining control of his body again. The body-crippling panic attack he usually experienced didn't come. He wasn't angry, he was sick. The nonsense the Sandaime spat out about the wall of fire made him sick, and the boy couldn't look the village leader in the eye after he found out the man left the warehouse untouched and standing tall as a symbol that Konoha wasn't the beacon of light people often thought it was. Kushina noticed the boy's averted eyes every time and stopped bringing Naruto to the Sarutobi residence a week after Naruto stopped showing real respect for the old village leader. And you want me to stay in the same general vicinity as a powerful pedophile and serial rapist that runs a village called Hidden Sound? My apologies, sir. It said quietly, respectfully. Naruto rolled his neck and got to work on his gloves. We're going with my plan. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.